Today we're talking about something that might hit close to home for a lot of you watching. It's about why so many people who were labeled as gifted or smart as kids end up feeling stuck, disconnected, and honestly pretty alone as adults. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? These were the kids everyone said had unlimited potential. They got all the praise, all the rewards. They were singled out as special. Parents couldn't stop talking about how proud they were. Everyone kept saying they'd go places and do great things. But now look at them, many in their 20s, 30s, or beyond, and something just feels off. Despite being capable people, they struggle with basic things like staying motivated, connecting with others, and finding purpose. They feel behind socially, but also feel like they should be further ahead in life by now. And the most confusing part is that from the outside, everything looks fine. They're still smart. They can still solve problems. But inside, there's this constant feeling of isolation. Like life is this amazing party happening right next door, and they can hear everyone having a great time, but they just can't find the door to get in. And there's an explanation for this phenomenon. Children identified as intelligent frequently construct their whole sense of self around their intellectual abilities. The unfortunate consequence is that the very attribute that made them feel exceptional in childhood becomes the precise reason that limits and constraints them in adulthood. So today, let's talk about why this happens and how to break free from this pattern. Because here's the truth. This isn't about failure. It's about outgrowing a survival strategy that's not working for you anymore. Let's start with how this smart kid identity forms in the first place. When we're young, forming our identity is pretty simple. Kids attach to clear, simple traits. You'll hear a kid say, "I'm the horse girl," or "I'm the boy who's good at soccer." These identities are super straightforward, even one-dimensional, but that's normal for kids. And they build their whole sense of self around these labels. And among all these potential identity anchors, being labeled the smart one is incredibly powerful. Think about what happens when a kid gets identified as gifted. Suddenly, they're getting all this positive attention. Adults talk about them differently. They get special opportunities. And that recognition feels amazing. Being smart becomes like a superpower, something that makes you valuable and worthy of attention. But here's where things start to go wrong. Look at what's actually being praised. It's getting the right answer immediately, understanding things the first time they're explained, finishing tests before everyone else, solving problems without even trying, picking up skills like it's nothing. See the pattern? We're not praising these kids for working hard. We're praising them for succeeding without effort. The message isn't "great job putting in the work." It's "wow, you're so smart, this comes naturally to you." And over time, that child starts to believe an equation that will mess them up later. Smart equals things coming easily. This becomes the foundation of their identity and self-worth. For a while, it works great. Through elementary and middle school, they thrive in environments designed to reward quick understanding and natural ability. But there's a huge problem with this foundation, and it shows up eventually. This is when this smart kid identity starts to fall apart. At some point, maybe in high school, college, or early career, something inevitable happens. These formerly gifted kids hit challenges that don't just give way to pure intelligence. They face problems that need persistence more than cleverness, skills that require practice, not just understanding. Like the college student who could write papers the night before now facing long-term projects that just can't be done last minute. The natural programmer who now needs to spend hours debugging code. The quick-thinking debater who discovers that building client relationships requires showing up consistently, not just being sharp in meetings. And when that happens, it doesn't feel like a normal challenge. It feels like an identity crisis. Because if your core belief is, "I'm valuable because I'm smart," and smart means things come easily to me, then struggling sends a devastating message. Maybe I'm not actually smart, and if I'm not smart, who am I? Unconsciously, and to protect this image and identity, you fall into a psychological trap with 3 painful outcomes. First, you start avoiding difficulties and challenges or anything you're not immediately good at, afraid of being exposed. You only raise your hand when you're absolutely certain of the answer. You choose easier classes instead of interesting ones. You procrastinate until you can't possibly perform at your best, giving yourself an excuse for any failure. Second, as this avoidance increases, your world gets smaller. You stick to a limited set of safe activities where your identity isn't threatened. You stop growing. Potential interests and passions get left behind. Life becomes about protecting what you have rather than exploring what you could become. And third, probably the most painful, you disconnect socially. Real connection usually forms through shared vulnerability, struggling together, being seen in your imperfections, working through challenges with others, and feeling that shared joy when you all improve together. But when you're constantly trying to protect this image of being effortlessly competent, you pull yourself out of these bonding experiences. You skip activities where you'd be a beginner alongside others. You back away from situations that might show your limitations, and you maintain this carefully curated image instead of being authentic. The result? This deep, persistent loneliness, even when you're surrounded by people who seem to like you. The isolation grows deeper at this point. You think to yourself, I'm intelligent. Shouldn't I be able to solve this problem? So you tackle emotional challenges with logical thinking. You attempt to boost your confidence through reasoning. You create rational arguments to persuade yourself that everything's fine. You excessively dissect your behaviors. But this approach fails because intellect wasn't created to heal emotional wounds. Intelligence isn't meant for building self-worth. It's designed to tackle problems in the external world. When you use it to try to feel better about yourself, you end up in a continuous loop because you can't find an intellectual solution to the question of, do I matter? That's a question that can only find its answer through emotional channels. And ironically, for those who were labeled as intellectually gifted, emotional development is frequently what was neglected along the way. Finally, the most isolating defense mechanism evolves, developing a sense of superiority. When the pain of exclusion becomes too sharp, many adopt this defensive position. Thoughts like, I don't connect with others because they're not on my level. Or, most people are just into shallow things that don't interest me. Or, I'm too deep or complex for typical social interactions. This isn't genuine arrogance. It's a protective mechanism. It feels better to believe you're choosing to be alone than to admit you feel unwelcome. So now that we understand how we got here, let's talk about how to move forward. The foundation of this whole solution is letting go of the smart kid identity. And I don't mean this as a nice suggestion. I mean it's absolutely essential. You've got to stop basing your entire self-worth on being the intelligent one. This identity might have served you well as a child, but now it's like a cage that limits your growth and prevents real connection. The shift happens when you start to believe something different about yourself. Instead of, I'm valuable because I'm smart, you begin to feel that I'm valuable because I'm human. Instead of, I must protect my image of intelligence at all costs, you start thinking, I will engage with life honestly. And rather than believing I should succeed effortlessly, you embrace the idea that I will learn through effort and growth. I found it helpful to think about this journey in 3 phases. Let's walk through them together. Phase 1 is what I call identity deconstruction. First, you need to separate intelligence from identity. Start noticing when thoughts like, I should already know this, or this should be easy for me, pop into your head. These thoughts are red flags. They're telling you that you're still equating intelligence with your worth as a person. Practice saying to yourself, intelligence is just one of my tools, not who I am. Next, get familiar with your defensive patterns. Pay attention to when you're avoiding challenges just to protect your image. Notice when you're analyzing people instead of connecting with them. Catch yourself when you're using, I'm just different, as a shield to avoid feeling vulnerable. And then, redefine what success actually means to you. Shift from asking, did I do this perfectly, to, did I learn something? Start valuing the process over the outcome, growth over performance. Celebrate your effort and persistence, rather than just the results. Once you've started breaking down that old identity, you can move to phase 2, new identity construction. This is where you actively embrace discomfort as a sign of growth. Choose activities where you don't have any head start. Use what I call the 5-minute rule. Just commit to 5 minutes of a difficult task, and you'll often find continuing is easier than you expected. Practice being a beginner without judging yourself. Then, build your courage to be vulnerable. Start with small acts of authentic sharing. Ask for help when you need it. Let others see your genuine reactions, not just your polished responses. Practice showing up as your real self, not your perfect self. You'll also need to develop emotional literacy. Practice expressing emotions directly rather than intellectualizing them. Connect with art, music, or stories that make you feel something real. And finally, let's talk about phase 3, connection and integration. This is where you step down from that pedestal you've been standing on. Choose participation over perfection. Join activities for the experience, not to excel at them. Value being present over being impressive. And most importantly, take imperfect action. Move forward without waiting for perfect understanding. Value showing up consistently over showing up impressively. Now I want to be real with you. This isn't a one-time fix, but a lifelong practice. You'll notice yourself slipping back into old patterns, especially during stress. That's completely normal. The goal isn't to never identify with intelligence again, but to hold it lightly as one aspect of who you are, not the core of your worth. The ultimate paradox is that when you stop trying so hard to prove how smart you are, you often access a deeper kind of intelligence. If this resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. Sometimes naming these patterns is the first step toward changing them. Take care of your mind, and I'll see you in the next video.